I started caving as a Boy Scout at age 13. My cousin was the leader of our Boy Scout troop in our explorer post, and the first thing he did was take us all in a cave because his younger brother and my other cousin had been a caver for some time and was of some renown. In fact, it took me 20 years to get out from under his shadow. The cave we went in was called Breathing Cave, and it's a well-known, very popular cave, but it's all horizontal. There are no rope requirements. So it was a lot of scrambling, a lot of crawling, a lot of getting in the mud, having a good time, but it was real caving for sure. And I got the bug the first trip. I said, this is for me. Actually, the explorer post that we designed was caving and climbing. So we totally embraced rock scrambling as well as going underground. So I designed a beret and patches for our coveralls and all of that with caving and climbing Explorer Post 18. I actually had to put caving aside when I got to college because I went to Davidson College in Flatland, North Carolina, and there was no caving to be had within 5 or 6 hours. So, and I went from there straight into the Army. My basic training was at Aberdeen Proving Grounds because I was an ordnance officer, and I trained in missile maintenance. And since that was the specialty I chose, they sent me to Redstone for my technical training. Once I finished my training in Huntsville, the Army saw fit to send me directly to Vietnam for a year. So there was no caving over there because there were other occupants in the caves. But once I got back, I asked them to send me back to Redstone, and they did. So I got 3 more years there of prime caving. And I wound up loving that area because it's full of caves, and I got in with the Huntsville Grotto and did everything they had to offer for 5 years total I spent down there. Caving in the Army was completely separate. I had to sneak away to go caving. After you're trained in a primary specialty, they want you to pick up a secondary. So they caught me off guard and said, well, what do you want to do as your secondary specialty? And I said this or that and the other, and they said, no, we don't need those. And I finally settled on procurement, and procurement school was at Fort Lee, which is the supply center of the Army. So that's where I got my specialty training in how to manage stuff, and it did serve me very well. Once I'd spent 4 years at the quartermaster school, they said, you've been there too long, son, time to move along. And I said, okay, what now? They said, well, you haven't been to Europe, let's send you over there for 3 years. I said, great, I'd love to see Europe. So off I went, and I wound up at the 200th Theater Army Material Management Command in Zweibrücken, which is far west Germany, right next to France. In Germany, I was pretty well busy with the job that I had, so time was spare. But I did get away half a dozen or a dozen times to go caving. And in the process, well, they had a European grotto of the NSS over there at that point, because there were a lot of military that were cavers. And we got together occasionally and went caving in Austria or France. And on occasion, we went to a cave in France that was next to this guy who had a little caving shop in his garage. His name was René Misery, M-I-Z-E-R-I. And he had made nylon coveralls. And it's the first we'd ever seen such a thing. We all bought some, and they were wonderful. And we enjoyed him very much. He had Petzl gear that was cheaper than anything we'd ever seen. In fact, we'd not seen a lot of Petzl at all at that point. But we developed a relationship to him and came back several times for more gear. The Petzl gear that we discovered in France was basically something new. We had seen some of the early black and white catalogs of Petzl gear, but we'd never seen the gear in hand. So it was very exciting, and it was very cheap. In fact, I could buy stuff retail from René and sell it in the States for twice my normal margin. One of the items that we discovered in Misery's shop was called a Traxon, and it was a unique piece that was an ascender and a descender all on one device. You wore it on your chest, had a little cam that you could climb up with, and you could also slip it and slide down the cave to get into the cave. What really geeks me out about gear is vertical, climbing gear, because I'm a big pit bobber. I love vertical caving, and anything, it has evolved dramatically in the last 30 years. So I've always been at the forefront of providing the latest and greatest technical gear. That's always been IMO's strong suit. We always had the latest extra gear because I was still buying from Europe, and Europe was advancing much more rapidly than the United States. We were Luddites as far as vertical gear. So I'd have all these new items every year, and I prided myself on having the latest. And I knew if I bought 2 of them, I would sell 1. When I came home from Germany, they wanted to post me at a place as close as possible to where I entered the Army to save their cost in turning me back to where I came from. So that spot was Fort Monroe in Tidewater, Virginia, which was a long way from the caves. It was about a 4-hour drive, but there were a lot of cavers down there that were making that drive, and I just fell in with that crowd. I went to the first caving event in the Virginia region and showed off my stuff, and everybody said, "Wow, where did you get that? Can I get some? Can you get me some?" And the idea first sparked to me that, hey, you know, I could kind of pay for my caving adventures doing this. I could get them some gear and get a little cash in my pocket. It was several years later that after I had fulfilled orders for all of my friends in the Virginia area, that it occurred to me that maybe this could be more than that. Because I'm a couple of years from retirement here, and I'm going to need something else to bring bread to the table. Unfortunately, within about a year, I foolishly sent some pictures of my operation back to Rene, and he quickly said, no, you can't do this with my name. You're not my business. Get your own company. I'm just your supplier. So overnight, I had to think of a new name and whether I wanted to create an actual business. So literally overnight, I came up with Intermountain Outfitters. So I had a friend of mine who was in design in Richmond actually put it together for me, and then we went through several iterations till we got it the way we liked it. Getting gear from Rene in France to come to Virginia was a hurdle and a half. In those days, there was no internet, there was no email. Had to call on the telephone. It was extremely expensive. So we were stuck with writing letters back and forth. And writing a letter in French was a trick for me because I didn't speak French very much. So I found a high school gal that lived down the street that was taking French, and she helped me compose a very basic letter to send over there to Rene after I had called one of my friends at the Tamsi and asked him to call Rene and tell him what was up and that I would send him an order. And he got the order and he sent me an acknowledgement, and a week or 2 later it came in, but it came into the port at Norfolk, and I had to figure out how to do the whole customs routine to get this stuff into the country. That was another learning experience. So once I had some gear in hand, I had to figure out how I was going to market it. And there was only one way to do that in those days, was to put an ad in the NSS News, which all NSS cavers got every month. And of course I had to mock that up myself, not just mock it up, but actually produce the actual ad, because all they were going to do is photograph it and literally paste it into the magazine. So I got good at creating ads at this point. Ads at the NSS News were never cheap. They saw their magazine as a prime real estate for cave vendors that were coming along. So I usually used the smallest possible ad, a 1/16 of a page, down in one corner, and I would talk to the editor and make sure I got good placement next to an interesting article. And eventually, as business got better, the ads got bigger, and I diversified a little bit. The other aspect of marketing IMO was to figure out how to get myself in front of the people. One way was advertising in the NSS News. The other way, and more important way, was showing the flag by appearing at all the caving events. Now, I didn't know where many of them were. I knew about Old Timers Reunion. I knew about Speleo Fest in Kentucky, But that was about it. So I just started paying real close attention to the NSS News because they had a calendar page every month. And I start seeing these other little events pop up. And so I would contact those folks and see if they would have a vendor. In those days, there were no cave vendors to speak of. There was only Bob and Bob. Bob started in California with another Bob, hence the name. And the other Bob crapped out pretty quickly. So Bob was all by himself. So he realized that most of the caving was going on in the east. So he moved him and his whole operation to West Virginia. He was the cave vendor for years and years and years. From, I think he started in 72 and I started in 84. So he was well on his way at that point. And he became a good friend. He was a little leery of me starting in, but competing with him. But he got over that when I started buying stuff from him to resell. On my first forays into caving events, I drove a Volkswagen Vanagon, made good mileage, but it wasn't exactly huge. But my method of containerizing my wares was to put them in 20 ream paper boxes from the Xerox machine at Fort Monroe. And that worked out perfectly because I could fit 6 of those boxes in the back of my Volkswagen and still have a place to sleep. I started traveling to what became about 12 events a year, which was between May and October, which meant just about every other weekend I was on the road, somewhere between West Virginia, Indiana, even as far as Missouri and Alabama. So I put a lot of miles in. Very quickly, my inventory outstripped what the Volkswagen could carry, and I had to figure out another solution. So I looked at one of the automotive stores and found a 4x6 trailer that I could assemble myself and then build a box on to be my sales outfit. And I built it up with 4x6 plywood, put a sloped roof on it, 2 doors in the back to get the boxes in and out, 2 doors on the roadside to put boxes in, and on the curbside, I put the classic 2 doors with hooks for all my merchandise. So it simplified setting up, I would just say, boom, there we are. The first little 4x6 trailer I built, I was hauling with the Vanagon, amazingly enough. It was struggle on the hills, but it was good most of the time. And it finally went by the wayside when I took it in for an engine replacement. And they put in a whole new engine. They got it all ready to go. Took it out for a test drive, and the fucker caught on fire and burned to the ground. That was the one I'd driven all over Europe in. It pissed me off big time. Very quickly, I ran out of space in that trailer as well. So I had to get bigger again. So I conned the NSS into buying that trailer for their stuff. And I went out and bought an actual, was it a 12-foot trailer? Had them put extra height in it so I wouldn't bump my head, and had them put the 2 doors on there, which was my trademark. The trailer was nice, but when it rained, I had to close my doors, so I needed some overhead cover. So I started using a 10 by 10 nylon tarp and these extending poles and ropes out to the side, which was a real pain in the neck, but that's all that was available at that point. So I went for years with backing a tarp up to my trailer and hoping for the best. I got blown down more than once, but something had to get a little better than that. It was 1992, and I had my almost brand new 12-foot trailer, and I was towing it with another Suburban, and we were just leaving home, and I had just had the old Suburban refitted. They'd done a ring job or something on it, and put it back together and got it to me just in time to go to Speleo Fest or wherever it was. And we were just heading up the mountain, leaving home, and we started seeing some exhaust going out that shouldn't be. And then I said, hey, wait a minute, we got a problem. There's a fire, and it was coming in under my pedals at that point. I said, the engine's on fire. So we quick stopped on the side of the road halfway up the mountain, And by the time we could get our stuff out, the vehicle was pretty much fully involved. And fortunately, truckers stopped behind us and were able to manhandle my trailer off the truck and run it 30 feet back to get it out of the line of fire, so to speak. But the truck went to a cinder right there while we watched. And this was 11 o'clock on a Friday night. Fortunately, the chief of the rescue squad took pity on us and took us to my parents' house in Stanton, which was 50 miles away. And he took the trailer behind us, actually, and we parked that in my parents' driveway, and they were none too pleased about that. Well, we pulled everything out and got reorganized and licked our wounds and got ready to figure out what we were going to do next. I was able to find a new vehicle in the 3 days we had before getting to the same event that we intended to. I had to go up to DC and pick up a Ford Econoline van that would do the trick. So we missed the event the weekend that we were leaving for, but we were headed to 2 events when we got to the second one. As my business started to grow, I started being more and more confident that I actually could make this work. And I worked toward that goal. I decided that when I left the Army, I would go back to where I came from in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, mostly because I needed to look after my parents, but secondly, because that was a major crossroads for cavers. The folks coming up from the east and the folks coming down from New York and New Jersey. I was the perfect crossroads between where all the best caves were. So that was a perfect location for me, and we spent about 3 years looking for the right spot till we finally found one that was right next to the interstate with an easy off, easy on. It was a house that used to be a roadhouse, but it had a separate garage, and that was my goal. So we wound up taking the garage and fleshing it out. We did walls and ceiling and can lights and all that stuff. I made an extra room at the back for people to change clothes in, and my office, and put the shop in the store. I had a friend whose father had a hardware store in Stanton, and they were renovating their store. So they're tossing out all their old girders and shelving. I bought all of that stuff for a modest sum and outfitted the whole store with it. I was pretty pleased with myself. It looked like the real deal. Then I had a glass counter in the back and all that good stuff. Business was pretty soft in the daytime, in the weekdays, but on the weekends, I was deluged every weekend with folks on their way to somewhere that needed a new pulley or a new whatever. So I started back at Fort Monroe using their Xerox machine, thank you very much. And I had designed a catalog. They had the earliest computers there, such that we were all on satellites from one mainframe computer. And so I would have to create my catalog in Microsoft Word and leave a little blank for where I would physically stick an image of the product that I would Xerox smaller and smaller and smaller until it would fit where I wanted it. It was tedious, but it got the job done. Later on, I got more sophisticated when computers finally came around. I was lucky to be in the Army at that point because they gave me a computer and showed me how to use it. And from there on, I built my own catalogs in WordPerfect, and then PageMaker was big back then. And I got to where I had a 54-page catalog with a color cover, and by the time I finished. So my transition from the military to Northern Virginia was in 1993. I spent a number of years after I left the Army in '87. I went back to work in the same office at the same desk with a different set of clothes. Thank goodness my boss needed me so badly, he kept me on as a civilian. But I really got tired of that by '93, and we'd found a place to be, so I said sayonara and left the Army forever. By the time we got settled in Virginia with my shop put together, I realized that the internet was a thing that was coming along. Actually, it was a teenager at one of the caving events who said, "You know, Alex, you really should have a website." And I'm the guy because I'm doing the website that we're going to put in place for the NSS, and we'd like to host you there. I said, hey, that sounds like a deal to me, but it didn't quite work out that way. But eventually I sat down with a book and learned how to code HTML and painstakingly built my catalog page by page and put it online in '97. Well, my website went through various iterations as I got better at the trade. It was pretty bare bones initially, but I finally got it worked out to where every product category had its own page and you could navigate among the pages. I was pretty proud of it at the time, but it's kind of pedantic at this point. Initially, I was pretty much dependent on other people's catalogs, the manufacturer's catalogs, and failing that, I would take a picture and put that up there. I got pretty good at creating my own images, but it took a while. I was dependent on black and white line art for the longest time. Initially, it was the events that kept food on the table with a little help from folks dropping by. But eventually, it got to the point where most of my business was internet. It was a continual process of outgrowing what I had and figuring how to get to the next step, and just by hook or by crook and mean strength and awkwardness, getting to the next level. It was all a learning experience. The caving at the Tag Fall Cave-In is one of my favorite events of all, not the least of which is because it's back in my favorite cave-in area in the Huntsville area. It's come a long way in 45 years now. It started with rather meager beginnings, like they all do, but it quickly got built out by the Dogwood City Grotto, has owned it for the whole time, and they keep on making it better. They've always got a new trick up their sleeve every year. It's been to 3 locations now. Used to be down the road from where it is presently. The current location has been theirs since, well, for 20 years now. It started out as a bare patch of forest in North Georgia, which they cleared, built a bathhouse, built a road into it, cleared campsites all around, just did a tremendous amount of work on it, and it made it into probably the best site an NSS caver has ever been to. I think the future of caving is pretty bright, actually. In its heyday in the 80s and 90s, the NSS was 12,000 strong. Now we've slimmed down to, we got down to about 7,500, but it's now on the rise, and it's been steady rising every year for the last 5. We're up to about 8,300 now, I believe. So I think it'll continue to grow because people have more leisure time, and it's better known than back in the day when people said, "You do what?" Everybody knows what a caver is now. He's not a spelunker anymore. What do I like about caving? I like the people. They're all good folks. We have a good time. We do a lot of traveling. We see a lot of the world that we wouldn't otherwise, above and below. And the feeling of camaraderie underground is something that you can't experience any other way unless perhaps cave diving. We have a good time underground, and when we get out, we party. So it's just a big family. That's what I love most about it. But the caving itself is always a challenge because you're looking for new passage that nobody's been in. You're looking for nice formations that nobody's ever seen to take pictures of. You're looking for evidence of previous inhabitants. The lure of caving for me was going where no one had ever been before, and the prospect of going, actually breaking new ground where people had never been was the excitement. There's always going to be some smaller passages and places where you have to wiggle and squeal, but most cavers start out doing the smallest stuff, and as they get older, they tend to stay in bigger passages. Leave it to the young folks to do the push in the rat holes. I don't have any difficulty being in small places. I've been in crawlways so small I couldn't move my head vertically. It had to be sideways. What they call it is an ear dipper, where you're keeping your nose above water, but everything else is below and your other ear is hitting the ceiling. I think the idea of having gone too far has probably occurred to every caver many times. That's when you know it's time to turn around, when you're not comfortable anymore. And at that point, you're not really turning around, you're backing up. Cavers are a special breed. When you're underground, your life depends on the company you keep. So cavers look out for each other, both underground and above. And we really consider other cavers to be family. When I'd done the business out of my own store in Virginia for about 20 years, I started thinking about how does one get out of business? Having gotten myself in here, I watched Bob Liebman fly his Bob and Bob into the ground, and I said, I don't want that to happen to me, so I better have a plan. And I was thinking about a plan, and there wasn't a plan materializing until Nina Martin approached me at a Tag Fall Cave-In and said, we'd like to buy your business. And I said, okay, where do I sign? And that was that. I was pleased to see Nina and Jeff Martin take over my business, and they jumped into it with all 4 feet. They built themselves a store behind their house initially. That sufficed for several years for them, but then they decided they needed to expand like everybody does. And so they moved to Northwest Georgia and built a whole business with their living quarters over top. And that sufficed they had it for 16 years and finally decided they needed to get out. And that's where Mike Green came in. I first met Mike Green at the Tag Fall Cave-In in 2022. He was interested in buying IMO, so I said, you sound like a reasonable guy to start this out. You got the business acumen, you got the financing, so more power to you. Now we have the 3rd owner of the business, and I've been pleased to see it progressing and getting bigger and better the whole time, so I'm a happy camper and a proud papa. I think IMO is in a great position now to move the ball forward yet again. He's got an actual physical location in a commercial building, not his garage, and he's set to expand big time in the next couple of years, and I'm excited for him. I think I'm proudest that the business I started with such lowly beginnings in 1984, and it's thriving. I'm delighted with that.